respectfully disagree, okay? I'm not here to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. These people didn't come here today to get a snow job. They want to know what happened. And I tell you, the first disappointment I had was Supervisor Pyle and myself and the rest of the board agreed that we wanted this matter agendized to let the community know what happened and why it happened. Mistakes are made. We're all human. We're all human, and we all do make errors. And there's no crime in it, but it's the way you handle the mistake is more important to me than the mistake. Okay. So since I've been a member of the board for nearly 3 years, most important discussions start off with a staff report. Okay. I've seen staff reports 30, 40, 50, up to 100 pages of staff report. The staff reports are important because it sets the tone for the discussion. It gives people the opportunity to digest that information prior to coming to the meeting, to ask intelligent questions. So, with the magnitude of this problem that we're faced with, I would have expected a comprehensive staff report to tell the story. That's not what we received. This item was on the agenda. The staff report consists of one paragraph. The story begins on October 31st and it ends on November 1st, according to your staff report. There's no information prior to this contained in the staff report. And then there's this one paragraph, and then there's a contrast. So I'm going to present what I feel is the synopsis of the situation, and I think it will. This is what should have been the staff report. It gives the full history, and to give a full explanation of the situation, you need to date back to our board meeting of April 10th, 2012. And in April 10th, 2012, this is a document from there, and I read your memorandum. At your board's April 10th, 2012 meeting, you discussed and agreed to several changes to the proposed Furlong resolution and directed that the revised version be placed on the April 24th, 2012 agenda for review and adoption. The resolution was placed on our April 24th agenda for adoption, and I point to point number 6 of that resolution, that the board unanimously passed and indicated this board's pleasure, or specifically regarding Building 170 and the one-stop. Point 6 says, the Building 170 is hereby transferred to the County of Lassen for use by Health and Social Service Department as a Family Resource Center. And the Director of Health and Social Services, in consultation with the Director of Public Works, is hereby directed to recommend an appropriation to support the full cost of utilizing that facility. So basically, the board made it very clear that we wanted to preserve not only the cell tower, the Building 170. It was to become cost neutral for the county, whereas the budget was going to come from the Melodies Department. We looked forward to closing the saga on the LRA, disposing of the property, getting some economic development, and protecting the resource center. So, with the resolution in place, the RFP process began. The first RFP was initiated December 2012. No qualifying bids were received. The second attempt at the RFP process was made mid-2013. In both the 2012 and the 2013 RFP processes, parcel V2, housing the Family Resource Center, was offered for sale. The 2013 RFP produced a buyer. The county hired an attorney to prepare a purchase and sale agreement. The purchase and sale agreement included parcel V2, which housed the Family Resource Center. The contract dated 17th of September 2013 was signed by the buyer. A preliminary title report, as called for in the contract, was ordered from Chicago Title Company. The Lassen County Assessor's Office provided legal descriptions to Chicago Title. Parcel V2 was included. And I have a copy of the preliminary title report, and clearly on page 2 it lists parcel V2 and the legal description. The preliminary title report was made available October 3rd, 2013. A copy of the preliminary title report was sent to the county offices on or about October 4th. The preliminary title report contains the legal description of parcels to be sold in Exhibit A in page 2 of the report. Parcel V2, housing the Family Resource Center, is clearly listed in this exhibit as one of the parcels to be sold. On October 31st, 2013, both the buyer and the seller appeared at Chicago Title Company, where the final documents were awaiting signature. The final documents were reviewed and signed by both parties. The final documents reviewed and signed contain parcel V2. Now, in your memorandum issued for today's meeting, there's a sentence, the last one of the paragraph, where it says, the description included the identifier of parcel V2, which none of our supervisory staff who reviewed the agreement recognized as the one-stop facility. Okay, so this sentence would indicate a recent name change to the parcel, or as a possible excuse for how we find ourselves here. I have here some documents dated back to 2003. The Lassen County acquired this property October 23rd, 2003. I have a record of survey right here, dated July 8th, 2003. This document is recorded with the Lassen County clerk as document 2003-10759, page 17/58. This recorded document clearly indicates that since 2003, the building that houses the Family Resource has been identified as parcel V2. It's right here, V2, 2003. So it isn't a recent change, as which has been passed on to the board as an excuse. The citizens of Lassen County deserve the truth, not a cover-up. The memorandum states, report on errors to the Herlong property sale. I conclude the actual sale contained no errors. The error is, the board unanimously passed a resolution detailing exactly how to and what properties to dispose of. This was a clear directive from this board to our county administrative officer. The errors occurred during this segment of the business. The buyer bought exactly what the county offered for sale, nothing more and nothing less. And I want to say, in full disclosure, because the public wants to know who's responsible. And I wasn't very pleased to discover this at midnight 5:30 last night. On September 17th of this year, you presented the board with the contract to approve for the disposal of Hurlong properties. It's right here. Unfortunately, what you presented, it doesn't have any maps or any of the other things that list the numbers of the parcels, B2, et cetera, It's just type and nothing to say, okay, this is this, like the RFP has, or these other surveys have. We were presented this on September 17th. We were advised that this contract met the wishes of the resolution the board unanimously passed, which was obviously to protect the cell tower and the one-stop. We trusted that this information in this contract you presented the board to vote on met the needs that we unanimously voted on. I voted on this, as well as these three supervisors, as well as past chairman.
I was on that meeting, I guess.
Sorry.
But I would have voted on it having been.
And the previous chair, Jack Hansen. We voted to approve this contract for sale. In this contract for sale, lists V2 as to be sold. The board approved this purchase contract to sell the Family Resource Building based on what you presented us in this contract. And they always say the buck stops here. I take full responsibility for my vote. I was misled. My instructions weren't carried out. I don't feel it's my duty to, I guess, maybe I need to rethink, It was a simple matter. We were given a contract that included that building, and this board passed the contract. We passed it, and that was the contract that was used for the sale. That was the contract that was used for the preliminary title report, and that was the contract that was used to prepare the deeds, all of which included V2. So that's the story, okay? Who's ultimately responsible? Your board of supervisors. We're the ones that you folks vote in, and you entrust us to have the proper structure in place to conduct county business the way it should be. And this is a disaster, and I'm embarrassed to be a part of it, but I accept responsibility. Thank you.
Okay, then.
I have one question for Mr. Lassen, and I'm just kind of curious, because I think you stated a very powerful series of events, and I know that in the first round of RFPs, that you were an active participant, and obviously that couldn't fall through because of the ruling that the FPPC and you got, and you backed out. But during that first process, because you were actively involved, were you aware of this defect?
No.
I mean, obviously you engaged with staff, so.
Yep, I'll tell you, thank you for bringing that. I didn't know if it was appropriate, but you brought it up.
No, I think it is relevant because it kind of gives an idea.
How I got involved the first go around. I've been working on trying to get this negative cash flow off the taxpayers' back since the day I joined the board. The county has squandered hundreds of thousands of dollars. They've used your prison mitigation funds to the... I used to have the figures in my head as I went to bed. I used to be so irritated about it, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. There has been 0% interest loans made. There's been every shenanigan going to keep the thing going. So finally, with the support of the whole board, we unanimously said we need to get out of this, give it to some business people. And I campaigned and fought for this RFP, and I really thought the investment community would come. And so I kind of was keeping an eye on things, like I was happy, and it came to my attention, I think the day before the RFP was going to close. that nobody was interested, you know? And I thought, how could nobody be interested, you know? And that was my motivation. I so wanted to get this crap off the county taxpayers' back. I spoke to my wife and my business partners, and we also invest in real estate. And I didn't know, and when I submitted my bid, I submitted it and told county council that if there's any conflict of interest, obviously I need to forget about this. But I wanted so desperately to rid the community of this stuff, and I felt confident that I could go partner up with some intelligent people and make something happen, that on the last day, I mean, I think I brought my RFP in there about 3 minutes before the deadline. So, to answer your question, Jim, I didn't really have time, I didn't really go through it. I knew what the board represented we were selling, and I did ask for a 90-day feasibility study, at which time I would have, in depth, would have looked. Okay, but when I did look, when this came up, in the course of about 60 seconds, I saw that V2 was on there.
Well, and that's the question I really want to
Yeah.
have answered, not so much the other stuff, is the fact that when you were engaged with staff, that at any time during that time you were engaged with them during that first process, was the fact that the
No.
V2 was part of the proposal and was being offered, because
No, nobody said, it was part of the proposal, it was in the
you
RFP.
saw that at that time.
I saw it after it, only after did I look. I was in a rush to meet the deadline, so I didn't look. I knew what the board said we were gonna sell.
So you were
Had no
aware
reason.
of it afterwards, but why wasn't that knowledge carried forward as they prepared the second one and went through?
I only
the next
looked
round?
when it came up,
Yeah.
just after when we made it, when it was told of the problem.
See, the
I
problem.
went back and had a look, I pulled mine out, and it stares
The
you
problem
right
I
in the
have is
face.
what staff has represented to us, it's not in this staff report, what they have represented to us is sometime between June 4th, when they released the second RFP, and sometime in mid-July, somewhere in that time frame, the existence of V2 being part of this RFP came to their knowledge, okay? And at that time, there was no effort made to bring that information to the board. Because had that come to the board clearly would have rejected the RFP, ordered them to go back through the process all over again and issue, if necessary, a new RFP minus the defect. I mean, and on September 17th, there were people who knew on staff that there was a defect in the RFP, not so much maybe as there was a defect in the final document, but there was a defect in the RFP, and that was never brought to the board's attention. I mean, I find that just unbelievable.
It is, and I'm aware of that, but my presentation was to try and give people how this happened, and that's what we're supposed to be doing today. Giving them the story of how did we go from the resolution in April to selling the building. So the point you brought up is true, and it just throws fuel to the fire that staff knew about the problem before the documents were signed.
Throughout that whole process, whenever the question was raised by the board, in the discussions that took place during the routine meetings, you know, is the cell tower property included, is the one-stop included, are those things? And the answers were always, the assurance was no, they were not. So I think that's important to have on the table.
So, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me the time. But I think before, there's a lot of questions, and I think people need to know what happened from the time we gave our instructions till today. And basically, that's
Okay, thank you. So we'll hear from the public now. Who wants to be first? Dude? You want to be first?
You want to hear my story? I think you've got a pretty down pat. Who you gonna fire? That's my question. Who you gonna fire?
That is a personnel action. Will not be taken out.
That's it. You know, the differences is, there's businesses and there's county government. And county government has now got into a lot of businesses. We have utility companies, we have gas companies, we have water companies, we have sewer companies, we have all kinds of companies. And when something happens, at whatever level it is, if it's at an employee level, the employee goes. At the county level, if it's an employee, the employee should go. In business, if it's a mid-management position, the business person should go. If it's county government, mid-management position, that person should be fired if they make these kind of mistakes. At the top, the CAO, if he made this mistake, he should be gone. If a CEO makes this mistake, he should be gone. Somebody needs to be gone. I would say on this thing. I got the board packet, I received the board packet, the bid packet. I looked at it, it looked like it was something that we might be interested in. Took a ride out to the property, I invited Felix. Felix came with me, and another one of my partners, and we were looking primarily at the sagebrush, to possibly put in some alfalfa. And we're driving around, and my partner says, that building's for sale, it's included. And Felix says, no, it's not. I said, well, yeah, it is. I said, you sure? He says, yeah. I said, it looks like it's included to me. And Felix said, no way would they sell that county building. Okay. So we went through the process, and nobody told us any different, so we put a bid in. Now, I believe there's a Larry Johnson who put a bid in, which was lower than ours, and he even asked the county if the building was for sale, and what a fair rent would be. And they told him it wasn't for sale. Well, you know, he took it, it wasn't for sale, but the bid never changed. No one ever changed anything. No one ever was notified. We got our preliminary draft, there's B2. Now, you call them B2, there's B2, Q, 1, 2, 3, they're all different numbers. We got our preliminary draft, and we said, we can't buy this way. We need addresses. You need to give us addresses. So the county went through a process, and they gave us addresses. Well, B2 is somewhere on Nevada Street. So, I don't know, that's the address the county gave us for B2. So it's not B2, it's not 170 David S. Hall Street. It has an address on Nevada Street. I don't have it here, but I have it at my office. Because there's different addresses for all those properties, and they don't correspond with the parcel numbers. But it's all part of your bid, your color-coded bid. We only bid, and we only purchase what you want to sell. Now, this thing, we asked through the preliminary title, does everything look okay? Yes, everything looks okay. Come down to the final days, and I believe it was, there's a couple of items that I wanted to clear up on the MOU at the airport, but there was a guy who signed it, Maurice. He says, well, if you don't sign this thing, we're pulling it out of escrow. I said, well, the hell with it. And I signed it, and we bought it. There was a few things I wanted to clear up, but I wasn't gonna wait because it was done. You sold that building. That was what you were selling. And there was ample time for people all the way through the process to recognize and realize that. All it would have taken is taking that paper that I took and take a drive with someone like Felix, and then you could have seen what you were selling. So it was one of the poorliest things I've ever seen done. If it was someone in my employment, it wouldn't be there today. Now, we still have two other things that are interesting. We've got the insurance certificate, so I will not close the one-shop. There still is the item with a handwritten personal note of mine that was a communications to the board that should have been presented in public, and it was not presented in public, but it ended up in the hands of Sam Williams. That needs to be addressed, how that can happen.
All right, Marty, what was
It did not come from me.
did not come from me? It did not come from me. I have no idea. Anybody have an answer to that? I don't know.
I have an answer. It came from me. And I got a copy of it. Sam Williams asked me about it. It has a date stamp on it, received, it's a public document, so I gave it to him. It didn't say on there confidential, attorney privilege, or anything of that nature, so I had no problems giving it to
It
him.
was not a confidential attorney privilege.
Yeah.
It was a public document to be presented to the board.
So,
It never got
was
presented to the
eventually
board.
presented
It never got presented to the board. So you're the one who got it from the CAO and gave it to Sam.
We all received copies of it, and I had it, and in a conversation I had with Sam, you know, he brought up the subject, and I said, yeah. He asked me if that was true, and I said, yes, it was.
So now we're down to why the public wasn't aware of it.
Well, the public was aware of it. I mean, at the board meeting that we had the following week, I held it up as a document. When we got into the discussions about elections and who was pointing fingers at who, and I said, to me, this is like Exhibit A. I mean, I think it was a reprehensible demand being placed upon the public.
Was it
And I
demand?
stated that publicly in a board meeting before I even gave it to Mr. Williams.
As long as the public was aware of that document before Mr. Williams, I have no problem.
Yeah, that was done at that following board meeting we had. I had it sitting right here. And we got into a discussion, I think it was a question, a debate that was raised by Ms. Spencer. And I held it up at that point. You know, I won, he lost, and, you know, this is the demand.
On Sunday
And I
Fridays,
made it real clear, I wasn't gonna be
As long as it was
supporting any
presented.
expenditure of funds, you know, to go for those demands. I mean, I think it's very simple.
well, you had your reason for that, and I agree with that reason. And we did not want that money, we wanted somebody to pay attention and get this thing rolling. But we, and we have, and that's good. The other part,
I'm satisfied.
we're satisfied with that.
What's next?
As long as the people see. Are you gonna call off your district attorney here, or whatever it is, county council, and Pete back here from trying to take our renters? I mean, are they instructed specifically to try to destroy our operation? We're there to create business. That's what we told you we're gonna do. We can't create business if you have people out there trying to relocate everyone who's there.
Yeah, in my direction,
I'd like to hear I'd like to hear from staff on it, but that's actually an accurate statement.
yeah, I don't think that's enough. I don't think anyone's gonna take your business. You wanna be sure there's, you know, rooms for the renters to relocate in if they're not gonna have a place to be in. I don't think it's satisfying the renters, the public. but-
Well, based upon the demand you made, I mean, you want us to leave them there and have them pay you $10,000 a month?
Of course not. I wanna negotiate here. Is somebody gonna set up negotiations for me?
Well, I would say you should negotiate with the renters. They're under the impression that they're gonna have to come up with $600,000 over the next 5 years.
What else? So you are not having any part of it, the renters, whoever's there, whether they're a county agency or not, is independent.
Yeah, they're independent of the county. I mean, if you want to, why don't you deed them the building? Let them have the building. You could do that very easily.
Okay, I thought there was county offices there.
Well, the county offices can be relocated and should be relocated.
Okay, so are the county offices there, yes or no?
I don't believe there's county offices there. The county uses the building for programs that are offered from time to time.
So there's no sense in, you know,
Let's get some insight. Melanie, would you like to, give some insight on this?
Melody Brawley, Lassen County Health and Social Services, and yes, there are county staff
Yeah.
housed in that building.
Okay.
And as far as separating us from the Family Resource Center and the Aurora Network, who are the other renters there, not too likely to happen since most of what they live on is money we contract with them to provide services to support the one-stop, and that supports our staff that are there.
Mr. Chair, just to follow up on something that Mr. Padilla said, I'd like to hear from staff, because the other thing, what we represented in the RFP, as part of it, was we had information on what buildings were currently leased, which, if you're buying real estate, indicates that you could expect, you know, some income of some of those buildings. So, I agree, if I buy something that I think is a lease, I would presume I'm gonna get some revenue, and if within 2 weeks after I buy it, the seller is there trying to move my tenants, I would also be. So I'd like to know if that's accurate, or can we hear from Pete on that?
Can you state exactly what the question
The
is?
question is, have you been to the part of the buildings that we sold as listed as currently leased, talking to tenants about relocating?
I'd like
It's a
to spoken
simple
generally
question.
with Janice Gotcher about.
Could you stand up and talk about it? It's hard to hear up here.
Yeah, I spoke with Janice Gotcher. I believe she's one of the Family Resource Center
Yes.
person about that. But that was all initiated based on the letter, or I don't know what we're called, the proposal of the $10,000 or $20,000 lease. Internally, staff discussed that that would be cost prohibitive, so we were looking at a solution if that was the case, that backups, which Mr. Nichols has already stated at the start of this meeting, that was one of the options on the table. So what I had done is contacted the school district, and actually that was with the assistance of Ms. Gotcher as well, and took a tour of the building to see if it was even feasible to possibly relocate staff in the current building 170 to the building 172, known as the preschool or child care center. Was I telling them what they were gonna move or anything like that? No, and I wasn't recruiting them or talking about cost or anything like that. It was just,
Was that the old, so you didn't approach anyone else, post office or any of the other tenants, just the family resource people, no other buildings?
no, that was all noticed ahead of time as the, once we got into the sales agreement. Actually, I think it was a letter went out just advising them that there was, the sales agreement was being set up and that they would probably have a new landlord at the close of the escrow for those properties. That was never done for the building 170. It was only done for the, and that's, I think, detailed in one of those attachments to that sales agreement as well.
So then, that's fine, and I appreciate that, because we did say we need to try and make a plan B in case, we needed to pursue